In this video, we're going to talk about Ethernet as it pertains to network cabling. So if you remember from earlier on in the course, I said that Ethernet has two aspects. It has a physical aspect and it has a logical aspect. So when we're talking about the network cabling, the connectors on the network cabling, the different types of network cabling, and the speed standards associated with the different types of network cabling, we're talking about the physical aspect. And that's what this video really focuses in on. Now, going back to the last lecture, remember that Ethernet is a network protocol. It's a standard that controls how data is transmitted over a local area network. It has the physical component and the logical component. Now, in regards to the actual standard's name, it's IEEE 802.3. And IEEE stands for the Institute of Electrical and Electronic Engineers. In regards to the type of cabling that it supports, well, it supports coaxial, twisted pair, and fiber optic, all the three different types that we're going to talk about in this section. Now, Ethernet's been around for quite some time, and the original standard only supported speeds of 10 megabit per second. And that's really slow when you can compare it to today's speeds, where we're up into the gigabit per second speeds. So 10 megabit per second compared to now well over 1 gigabit per second speeds, we've really gone up in speeds and Ethernet has greatly evolved over time. Now, before we switch over to the next slide, I do want to mention the logical components. Again, we're not going to focus on those in this video, but I do have them here. So we have CSMA/CD and CSMA/CA. This is our logical component. So this is for a wired network. So when we're talking about CSMA/CD, we're talking about a wired and a switched network. So if we're using switches, meaning a switched network, we utilize CSMA/CD, and we're going to talk about how that works. Now, if we're on a wireless network, then we use CSMA/CA. Again, different methodologies, and I'll talk about the difference between what CD and CA means later in the course. Just understand that this is the logical component, and all this down here, everything else, that's the physical component. So when it comes to Ethernet cabling, Ethernet has its own naming convention. Now, it's not that popular, but for those of you that go on and pursue a career in IT or networking, it's something you're going to want to know. So this is the naming format where we have N, then we have the signaling, and then we have X, where N is the speed of the cable. It's the signaling rate, but in other words, the speed of the cable. Signaling, well, for our purposes, it's going to be baseband. You can also have broadband, but ours is only baseband, and I'll talk about why that is in a second. And then lastly, X stands for the type of the cable. And in this instance and in this lecture, I really focused in on twisted pair, but it could be fiber or it could be coaxial as well. Now, let's talk about why we only have baseband. Well, there's a specific reason why we only have baseband, because if you think back to our lecture where we're talking about modems, remember there was an analog side of the modem and then there was a digital side. Well, the digital side is baseband. And so when we're talking about baseband, we talk about base. So this refers to digital signals. And if you think about a local area network, it deals with digital signals as well. So that's why we're only going to deal with that in this lecture and in this course. So I've gone ahead and I put together a table that shows the different standards. Now, one thing I want to point out is that in addition to the stereotypical Ethernet standard name that we see right here, there's actually a more popular one. That is the CAT, which stands for the Copper Cabling Standard, the CAT3 up through the CAT7 naming. If you actually go out to Amazon or another online retailer, they're going to use this naming convention over this naming convention. So you're going to see the CAT standards, and you're typically not going to see the Ethernet standards. So if you see CAT6, just understand that they're going to be talking about this Ethernet standard, and they really tell us the same thing. We just need to understand which ones they actually refer to. So when we're talking about Cat 3, they're talking about the first Ethernet standard, which was our 10 megabit per second speeds, so our 10 base T. And then also, as we go up over time, what you're going to notice as we go from Cat 3 all the way up to the Cat 7, the speeds increase. So we go from 10 megabit per second all the way up to well over gigabit speeds. In fact, up to 10 gigabit per second speeds up to Cat 7. Now, there is a Cat 8. It's not that prominent, so I didn't include it in this table. I just want you to understand the basics. If you understand how this works, then you're going to understand how it works for Cat 8 as well. Now, what you're going to notice with the Ethernet standard is that when we are at 1 gigabit or less, it actually writes it out all the way. So we have 10 for 10 megabit per second, we have 100 for 100 megabit per second, and we have 1000 for 1 gigabit per second. But once we get up over 1 gigabit, then we write in a G. So 10G tells us that it is 10 gigabit per second speeds. Now also, there's a network type name as well. So again, we call the 10 megabit per second one Cat 3, just standard Ethernet. Once we got up to Cat 5, we called that fast Ethernet, which was 100 megabit per second speeds. And these two, and let me get rid of all the highlighting to get it off the screen. But in terms of what you can actually purchase, well, you can't purchase this and you can't purchase this. You can only purchase Cat 5e or newer cables. And the most common type of cable is really going to be either Cat 5e or Cat 6. And a majority of the time, what you're going to find is that is Cat 5e. Now, also, what I want to point out is the maximum distance, 100 meters. So the theoretical maximum distance for twisted pair copper cabling is 100 meters. After that, attenuation takes effect, and theoretically, you shouldn't be using a cable that's longer than 100 meters in length without some sort of repeater. Now, what you're going to notice with Cat 6 is that we have two numbers here. We have 100 meters and 55 meters, and it's just the speeds associated with it. So with this standard, up to 100 meters, it'll support 1 gigabit per second. But if you want 10 gigabit per second speeds, then you can only go up to 55 meters. Past that, it's not going to support it. So anyways, this is a standard table that helps us identify what we're talking about when we're looking at the different standards. So anyways, that's going to conclude our lecture talking about Ethernet as it applies to network cabling. If you have any questions, please let me know. If not, thanks for watching, and I'll see you at the next lecture. Take care.